So we also, it's right now it's such a difficult time in the world, and it's so easy to focus on the negative stuff, so much going on, right? And so we for me, education transformed my life. I was able to get tools to be able to change my material conditions, right? Education was the one tool that provided that. And looking at the screen and all the people that are here that earned their degree last year, and that do so much for our community, you all are contributing to this life-affirming institution. An institution that can be life-affirming for many of us, right? That can be transformative for many of us. And you contribute so much to that. And it's important even in these very difficult times to honor and celebrate the work that you do to create that transformative change that we need in the world. So thank you so much for being here. Now I'm gonna introduce our moderator, Dimple Jane, Dr. Dimple Jane. She's an associate professor in educational leadership and policy studies. Several of the folks here today graduated with their doctoral degree in education. Some of them her students. She's a first-generation college student from a South Asian family. She received her bachelor degree in history from Western Washington University, and her master's and doctoral degree in higher education and organizational change from UCLA. Her research centers on the relationship between community colleges and universities, most notably how baccalaureate granting institutions can develop and maintain a transfer receptive culture for students of color. She utilizes critical race and womanist frameworks within her scholarship to explore issues related to the transfer function, faculty mentor and mentorship, and women of color leadership. And anytime that I ask Dimple, can you support this work, she steps up, and I'm just so grateful to have you part of our community, Dimple, and everything that you do. Tomorrow she's going to be in a 2-hour interview session interviewing students for an internship. So you do so much as well. So thank you, Dimple. And with that, I'll change it over to you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much. And thank you to EEC. And if you want to know who's like really behind the driving force of many social justice change movements, it's you, Martha, at CSUN. Like, I don't know when you sleep. I don't know how you sleep. I get super early morning, well, anything super early morning for me if it's before 8 a.m., but really like super early morning emails from you. And I really want to see, like, if you have a magical color-coded calendar org chart. I know there's something there that I can learn from. So thank you everyone for coming here today. I know it's a Wednesday afternoon and it's your lunch hour, but I'm so happy that we can be together in community and to really celebrate accomplishments. So many times we kind of walk past our achievements and we see them as just, something that happened, and then we have to move on to the next class or the next meeting or the next family commitment. So I'm really glad that we're here taking this time to celebrate these achievements, and not only what they mean for us as individuals, but what they mean for us as a community, and not just a CSUN community, but all the communities that we're involved in and all the communities that we are inextricably linked together with. So with that, I'm going to just do really brief introductions to the panelists. And then I would like the panelists to talk a little bit more about your work, your research focus, your area of practice. You'll each get a few minutes to do that. And then we'll go into a larger discussion, a larger Q&A panel. And then after that, the floor is open. We would love for you all to engage with us. Maybe we can play some music together. I don't know. Cue up your Spotify playlist. Let's see what happens. And let's really think about this as a moment of celebration and a moment of joy. especially with everything that's been going on this past week and yesterday. It's really important to keep these moments in context. So I'm going to start with introductions. I'm going to start alphabetically. So I'm going to first start with Dr. Helen Heinrich. Hello, Helen. Helen is currently the Interim Associate Vice President for Academic Technology, as well as a tenured faculty member at the University Library. She got her bachelor's from St. Petersburg University of Culture in Russia, a master's degree in library and information science from UCLA, as well as a doctorate in educational leadership at CSUN. Helen is also number 2 of 2 siblings, and her first job before immigration was actually in the library. So I think you chose the right career path, Helen. And when the world opens up, she would like to go to Italy. So welcome, Helen. Thank you. Our next panelist, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna thank you.
Awesome. Our next panelist is Dr. Dejel Johnson. He's an academic advisor in the College of Engineering and Computer Science, as well as a part-time lecturer in the academic first-year experience at CSUN. Dejel got his doctorate in educational leadership at CSUN, and he's also identifies as a first-generation college student, the youngest of 4 siblings. His family nickname, now you all know this, you can all address him as this, is Dr. D. And when the world opens up, you can find Dejel with a big tub of popcorn in a movie theater. That is where he wants to go first. Welcome, Dejel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dimple.
Dr. Vanessa Martinez is in the College of Humanities as the Graduation and Retention Advising Specialist. She has a master's in psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a bachelor's degree in psychology from UC Irvine, as well as her doctorate in educational leadership at CSUN. Dr. Martinez is the youngest of 5 siblings. Her first job was also at a library, Helen and Vanessa. I don't know if you knew that about each other. And when the world opens up, Vanessa has been studying Italian and Arabic in particular, so she can go to Italy, Spain, Greece, and Lebanon. Vanessa, when you make that itinerary, you can just slide it to me in my email and we'll see if we can coordinate. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here too.
Dr. Alex Ojeda is a faculty member in criminology and justice studies and the director of CSUN's Mosaic, Mentoring to Overcome Struggles and Inspire Courage, and the youth program, and he is the coordinator of the LA Valley Next Up and Guardian Scholars foster youth programs. So if you lost count, Alex has 3 jobs, and he is the youngest of 6 siblings. His family nickname, you can all address him as this later, is Tito, and he would like to go to Mexico City. That is where he would like to go when the world opens up. Welcome, Dr. Ojeda. And last but not least is Dr. Freddy Sanchez. He is the Associate Director of Marketing and Programs for the USU departments at CSUN. That includes diversity and inclusion, events, marketing, Pride Center, Veterans Resource Center, and leadership development for the USU Board of Directors. Freddy got his Master's of Education in Post-Secondary Administration and Student Affairs from USC. He got his 2 bachelor degrees, both in Spanish and financial, I didn't even know this was a thing, financial mathematics and statistics from UC Santa Barbara. And he got his PhD in the joint PhD program in education between Claremont and San Diego State. Freddie is the middle of 6 siblings. He's the first in his family to get a doctorate degree. And when the world opens up, although Freddie has enjoyed it not opening up, he's enjoyed kind of laying low. But when it does open up, he would like to go to France with his partner. So welcome, doctors. Thank you. Next, I think if we could just hear from each one of you a little bit about your work, again, both your research areas, your practice areas, and what the doctorate means for all of that. And then we'll get into a moderated Q&A. But I'm going to set a 5-minute timer. So each presenter will have 5 minutes. And if you go over, I will harass you privately through chat. Okay. All right. Dr. Heinrich, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Martha, for the invitation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited and really nervous. So I feel like I'm more nervous than when I was defending my dissertation. So I would like to just briefly say that I am very lucky to have my area of practice matching and mapping and coinciding with my area of research. And that specifically with that, I'm going to share my screen. I hope I can, hold on a second. So I know that technology is intimidating because I work in that area. Hold on. All right, I hope you can all see my screen. So what I wanted very briefly to share with you about is my area of passion, and that is how do we affect change? And in my case, change has to do with technology and helping faculty to increase effectiveness of teaching through technology. So hence my dissertation was focused about around the factors that impact faculty decision-making about technology. As we know, so I started my research before COVID. As we know, COVID changed everything and moved technology to the forefront of education, and basically it became the backbone of delivery of education during the pandemic. My research, the context for the research study was that, first of all, we have technology, then we have faculty that employ that technology, and we have students who use technology ubiquitously in their life. And then we have another prevalent technology, which is learning management system, and how that factors into all those variables. What I did, and I was really fascinating, in my work, we always were and have been pushing to have faculty adopt technology more broadly. And it always feels like it's hit and miss. And then, when I started digging into it, I realized that the decision-making actually has patterns and has predictable dynamics, and especially with the adoption of technology. So I used the framework of Diffusion of Innovations by Everett Rogers to explore that. And many of you know that any social system, and this was primarily the focus of my research, any social system has different categories of adopters. So starting from innovators and going all the way to the laggards, those who really don't adopt any technology unless they have to. What was also more interesting for me, even more interesting, was that every decision has 5 stages, and they're about the knowledge of the innovation, persuasion, or whether we're able to convince faculty, then the actual decision making, and then implementation and routinization of that innovation. And I frame my study around the research questions that have to do about the factors of adoption of technology, as well as the characteristic of faculty who may or may not be adopting the technology. There is a plenty of literature review of literature that look into that topic. So you can imagine now it's exploding even more. And I use the qualitative method of study and interview as my method of research. So I interviewed faculty. What was really interesting for me when I looked at the gaps between what the research literature provides and my practical study is that student expectations were the primary driver for faculty to make decisions about adopting technology into their teaching. So that was one new discovery, new finding that was not covered by any of the prior research body. And then the second one was always interesting, was that faculty actually listened to the institutional decisions. So as much, and I'm a faculty member myself, we like faculty governance and independence. What really happens in practice that the authority, the authority line of the institution has a direct impact on faculty decisions. So, you know, although there is a certain organizational tension between those, you know, faculty governance as well as the authority lines, still the authority decision has a direct impact on faculty adoption of technology. Then among other factors, it was efficiency of teaching. Technology definitely helps with that, and considerations for engaging students more deeper, and availability of training and institutional support was also one of the biggest factors of adopting the technology. And then I didn't find any direct correlations between the faculty characteristics and considerations of the adoption, except for the length of teaching with the faculty. So there was the age of the faculty members, because I did collect that demographic information, and length of teaching at the institution. So, and I covered the two new findings that I found. And what was really interesting for me, because the program itself, as well as my work as a practitioner, what I want to do is to impact change. So here is the implications of my research on practice is that when we think about adopting technology and broadening it within faculty, we need to think of educating and introducing students to that technology, and by using students as one of our factors, then we can impact faculty decision making. And then, of course, we leverage institutional decisions and rely on them as well. And then expansion of technology training is basically what I do in my everyday work. So helping faculty get familiar and more comfortable with technology. And that's very briefly the center of my research. And I don't know if I
Thank you, Helen.
Okay, so just in time. I was nervous I was going over my time, because I'm really passionate about the subject and about the findings, and I try to implement them every day in my work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. All right, Dr. Johnson, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you so much. So everybody's able to see me clearly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. I guess let me go ahead and share my screen as well. I recently kind of did a presentation on my research not too long ago, so I'll kind of just use some of that information. So to really start, first off, I just want to say thank you so much, Martha, and your team for hosting this event, for really giving us the opportunity to be seen, to be visible, and to really kind of cherish and award us for our accomplishments. And so thank you for that. My research was really just kind of really centered on Black women. It really was something that I knew that I wanted to do when I first started. The title of it was Untapped, Unstoppable: Exploring the Experiences of Black Women in Engineering and Computer Science Fields. So the goal really was to center the focus and to really address and dismantle those STEM systemic inequities that really hinder Black women's success and representation within these fields. Going into the literature, I found that, Black women are one of the most severely untapped and underrepresented groups within STEM, and especially within engineering and computer science fields. I found that, in engineering alone, looking at this, about a little over 25% of engineering bachelor's degrees that were ordered to Black students in 2011, and this number really hasn't changed much. Less than 1% of those who earned their degrees were earned by Black women. So I wanted to consider what are those systemic factors that are hindering their representation, and also to really address the significant gap in research that focuses solely really on Black women alone in isolation, aside from Black males' experiences, and really women of color's experiences, because they often find themselves encountering this double bind where their gender and their race have different oppressions that are attached to them, where they find that they have opposing oppressions that are attached to that. So the purpose of my research was to, again, advance the discourse on their racialized and their gendered experiences within these fields, to uncover how their peer-to-peer and student-faculty interactions are shaped by that. And the two research questions that guided my study are: what are Black women's undergraduate experiences within these fields at a large urban public institution? And really, how do their peer support interactions shape those experiences? Going into the literature, the systemic factors that I was able to uncover that really contributed to their underrepresentation and their unsatisfaction with these fields was the fact that there's a lack of role models of those who look like them in education and in their STEM careers. In the K-12 pipeline, there's limited support, feelings of isolation, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do was find a way to frame this study. So I used Black feminist thought and intersectionality to really help me to understand Black women's experiences within these white male-dominated environments, and to really bring attention to their overlapping forms of oppression within these fields. So I used grounded theory to sample basically 11 women at this university called Elmwood as a pseudonym, and there was only 11 students out of 23 in the entire college who were able to participate. I conducted a focus group and several interviews, and I was able to really uncover this really rich data. So several themes that I uncovered from the study were really a lot of our participants talking about how they shared this overwhelming sense of alienation and exclusion within engineering and within their STEM fields. They found that there's nobody who looks like them. Some students talked about being really the only one who looks like them in all of their STEM classes, feeling invisible, feeling unwelcomed, experiencing unequal and inequitable balance of support from their faculty, looking around and finding others who don't look like them, receiving support and opportunities. Finding that there are literally no very, very minimal Black faces within their peers and their faculty within their program. So it was talking about how their lack of shared identity creates this lack of commitment and connection to their majors. So through all of these different themes, and learning a little bit more about some of the students' racialized and gendered experiences, some of their microaggressions that they faced, I had to kind of figure out a way to come up with some implications for practice and policy, and really just find ways that we can really support some of our students. So I found that we must increase, promote, and retain the representation of Black faculty, implement implicit bias training for all faculty who exist and all who come in, create safe spaces for our students. And what I wanted to just really reflect on was what most of our students really wanted us to know was the importance of shared identity. The shared identity was so important. The fact that they didn't see anybody who looked like them in terms of their race and their gender within their fields, not in their curriculum. It was something that increased their feelings, their lack of feelings of belonging, and their lack of satisfaction. So really what my dissertation really did was highlighted the racialized and gendered experiences that they experience, and highlighting the fact that they are all a part of STEM's systemic inequities. Higher education is complicit in the lack of investment in Black students, the lack of investment in their careers, and then also overtly advancing the careers of non-Black faculty in all fields, right? So at the end, and I know I'm over my time, my goal was really just to dismantle the patriarchy and really develop this commitment to justice, so that way we can hold these institutions accountable and resist turning a blind eye to the overall themes that emerged from my study. And that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I like how your goal was just to dismantle the patriarchy. That sounds like a goal that we can all get behind, and that I'm very proud to be a part of. So thank you.
Yeah, we all know how easy that is.
So easy, so easy. Yeah, it's next on my list to do, actually. Dr. Martinez, would you like to go next and just share a little bit about your work?
Hi, sorry, my internet's a little slow, so I might have a little bit of spotty internet. And let me just share with you all, thank you also for being here, I really appreciate it. So let me share the screen if I'm able to do that. Okay. So my research is on first generation to college Chicano Latino students attending a Hispanic serving institution. And so just a little bit from my dissertation defense, which I did in December, it's called La Lucha Continua, The Struggle Continues, Latina, Latino, Latinx, First Generation to College Students, Persistence at a Hispanic Serving Institution. And, you know, a lot of the research that I'm looking at focuses on Latinos in the US being a large percentage, one of the largest ethnic minority groups in the US with 18% of the total population, yet we are at lower levels of college attainment and also being faced with unwelcoming campus climates. And so that also affects it. And so while we have 15% of Latinos in the US that earned a bachelor's degree or higher, it's problematic because we have such a large population that's so underrepresented in higher ed. And then they also tend to have higher enrollment in Hispanic serving institutions such as CSUN. And so one of the problems I was looking at specifically was that Latino students are underrepresented in higher ed and they have lower rates of degree completion. They also, sorry about that, they also are not necessarily successful in graduating. These HSIs are not necessarily successful in graduating as they are in enrolling the students. And so we have the percentage of Latino students that are enrolled, but it's not the same as the percentage of students that are graduating. And HSIs may lack inclusion of diversity and welcoming campus climates that promote the persistence and student success in the long run. So my purpose was to understand the Latino students' experience at a Hispanic serving institution and the relationship of those experiences with coping strategies that influence college persistence for first generation to college Latinx students at an HSI. Also to determine whether or not Latinx undergraduate students are connecting to campus, are joining clubs, experiencing a welcoming and culturally congruent campus climate, and developing a sense of belonging there. And to understand what promotes Latino college student persistence, such as being connected to the institution and feeling as if it's a welcoming climate. I looked at what psychosociocultural factors influence the persistence of first generation Latina, Latino, Latinx students enrolled at a public four-year HSI, and what psychological, social, and cultural coping mechanisms these students identify as important in their persistence in college, as well as how do Latino students' coping mechanisms influence their sense of belonging at a public four-year HSI. And finally, what role does discrimination in campus climate play in creating a welcoming university environment? And in that, I read literature on Hispanic serving institutions, first generation to college students, social support, family, cultural congruity, and sense of belonging. And a lot of times it's showing that our first generation to college students who are Latino, Latinx, they are juggling the values of academia with the values of their expectations of being with a family and taking care of them, as well as, you know, such a high value for family within the Latino culture and placing education first for these students. And so finding that in the literature, a lot of it was saying that some of the strongest predictors was having cultural congruity with having a campus that is congruent with the students' culture, and a campus that also develops a sense of belonging and helps these students persist and stay there a little longer. Some of the theoretical frameworks I used were the psychosociocultural framework by Drs. Gloria Rodriguez and Dr. Castellanos also talks about this, as well as critical race theory to explain the racial inequalities for students of color in higher ed. and how systemic racism affects their perceptions of race and prejudice encountered at the university and in other areas as well. And so I won't go into too details, but pretty much what I'm looking at for psychological is like their self-esteem, self-efficacy, and then as far as their environment being the university context, the culture being their ethnic identity and how congruent it is to the university campus, and social being family, mentors, and then all of that affecting persistence. And I'm going to skip over CRT just because for the sake of time, quickly understanding the research setting, excuse me, was predominantly first generation to college students, 72%, as well as high percentage of Pell Grant recipients. Our faculty at this university specifically identifies 61% as white, 13% Asian, 12.5% Latinx, 4% African American and Black, and then it goes on and on. But our Latino student population is over 50% at this university. So there's a big difference, a big gap between our Latinx professors as well as the students. And so that's just an example of the students at the university I looked at. I specifically examined 24 students, interviewed them, half Chicano, half Latinos of other ethnic groups. And so equal representation of gender as well. And some of the themes looking at ganas, meaning like their desire to continue in school, and then their challenges they face, ethnic identity, cultural congruity, the role of persistence in family, racialized campus climate experiences, and discrimination, and their access to resources and college adjustment. So various themes that we went through in Ghana as far as their families supporting them. Oops, sorry about that. And then their ability to prove them wrong. And I'm going to skip through this section. We went through some challenges such as financial issues, mental health challenges. We looked at access to campus resources, coping and college adjustment, and including their advisors and counselors as part of this adjustment, and other resources on campus, including the Career Center, Library, Wellness Center, and the gym as far as exercise. Ethnic identity and sense of belonging as well as cultural congruity shows up in areas such as faculty mentors that can help them feel like they belong, the influence of discrimination on their ethnic identity, influence of discrimination on university environment, and their sense of belonging related to their ethnic group. They also experienced many racialized campus climate experiences and discrimination. Oh, sorry, skip that for now. But overall, let me see, overall, the undergraduates at this four-year university persisted despite all the challenges they experienced. Sorry, again, my computer's a little slow right now. And as minoritized first generation students, interweaving both the PSC and CRT into it to create a holistic view of the psychosocial cultural factors that influence and the influence of discrimination and racism on the persistence of these Latinx first generation to college students, and those 6 overarching themes as well. So again, this is more in detail, but there's some access to campus resources that we wanted to consider, including the campus involvement, their connection with HSI, Hispanic serving type of organizations or Latino-based organizations, as well as their connection to family and feeling like that's part of the university itself. So I think that's all I have for you for that. Overall, like my goal, again, I'm a first generation college Chicana, Latina, Native American, and I think it's important to be able to understand this lack in the research and everything, and how it was helpful for me to have these mentors, especially culturally similar mentors, in the process of getting my degree and having that support. Thanks again to everyone that was a part of it.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more presentations and then we'll summarize and transition. Dr. Ojeda, would you like to go next?
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Jan. Thank you everyone for being here today. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. All right. Can y'all see my screen there?
Yes.
Awesome. So welcome again, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor to be able to share my work with everybody here. I see so many familiar faces, so many friends, colleagues, comrades, allies, co-conspirators here. I just wanted to give a special shout out to my CC17 family, my ELPS family, my dissertation committee, Dr. Tracy Buenavista, Dr. Miguel Ceja, Dr. Edwin Hernandez, as well as my Mosaic family. I think it's the Mosaic program has really been essential in my work, particularly with the folks who are helping run the program. Monica Montoya, who I think is also on this call, who's also graduating with her MSW in a couple weeks. So shout out to Monica and shout out to the rest of the Mosaic Ally team. I know there's a lot of Mosaic allies on this call. And also a big shout out to Marta for the invitation and for Dimple for moderating. And just the gratitude can go on and on and on. And I know Dr. William Watkins is here also supporting, Dean Searcy from the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Thank you all so much for the support. And once again, my name is Dr. Alex Ojeda. And my dissertation was really around this idea of the continuation high school to community college pipeline. So the title of my dissertation is Momachtih Kasasanali. And Momachtih Kasasanali in the Nahuatl language translates to literally student stories. So what I really wanted to do was capture the stories of students who graduated from a continuation high school and immediately went into community college. So I wanted to know what were the factors that kind of influenced that decision. So my research questions were, what are the educational experiences of Latinx community college students who previously graduated from a continuation high school? And for those of you that are not familiar, continuation high schools are essentially alternative schooling systems that were in place to provide a high school education to non-traditional students. For example, students who have to go to work to help the family income, students who are teen parents, students who have been pushed out of their traditional high school. So I wanted to really focus on this particular population because the majority of continuation high school students are students of color. So that allowed me to racialize this research and really use a critical race theory along with narrative inquiry to look at their experiences through this type of framework. So the second question was, how did attending a continuation high school inform their aspirations to pursue higher education? We know that continuation high schools have over 50% dropout rate, meaning that when students enter a continuation high school, there's no really chance of them graduating or expectations of them graduating high school, much less attending college. So I'm looking at the students that went directly to college after continuation high school graduation because that population is really, really slim. The third question is, what factors hinder or successfully shape Latinx student transitions along the continuation high school to community college pipeline? And I really want to emphasize that I use Latinx in a very generalized sense, meaning that the students that I interviewed 9 continuation high school graduates, current college students who all identified as either Mexican, Central American, or Mexican or Colombian, right? So I use the term Latinx not to minimize those identities, but kind of to generalize it for the sake of this study. So just a brief overview of the findings. I'm not going to go over the entire research due to time restraints, but I did want to give you all a brief synopsis of the findings I had and kind of the context in which I kind of directed this study. So I used an indigenous Mesoamerican framework, which highlighted the transformative potential of continuation high schools and community colleges specifically for Latinx students. So some of the themes that came up as I was analyzing the data. So after I interviewed these students, I noticed that there was these common parallels. I noticed that there was all these correlations between their stories that all overlap. So some of the concepts that I pulled out were these concepts of obstruction and misperception. So a lot of students felt that when they entered the continuation high school, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any direction, and they kind of felt like they were just there. So what I did is I related that to a concept, an indigenous concept called Ishkimili, which essentially refers to the obstruction or the lack of clarity in one's internal awareness. And I also noticed that students, after sensing that they had that lack of obstruction, they started kind of morphing into this idea of gaining clarity or self-awareness. So once they entered the continuation high school system, they started noticing that there was a sense of clarity, a sense of misperception, a sense of obstruction. So what they started doing was gaining more clarity, gaining more self-awareness. And in turn, they started transforming their ideas, which is what I tied to this concept of Xipetotec, which literally refers to rejuvenation. So these three themes essentially were overlapping themes throughout all of the interviews. So I felt that it was important to use an indigenous framework, not only to honor my ancestors and honor the native people of this land and the original stewards of this land, but also to let students know, particularly the participants in this study, that their indigenous culture is very much alive. It's very much alive and it's thriving. So I wanted to use that also not only to honor my ancestors, but also to prove to folks that indigenous knowledge and indigenous philosophy is still very much alive and thriving today. So the first concept, Ishkimili, again, refers to these aspects of educational obstructions. When you ask a continuation high school student if they're planning to go to college, most of them say, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to graduate. So that translates to this misperception of them not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being rich enough. So it really encompasses this idea of a distorted vision or a lack of perception, which causes obstruction, meaning that you can't see what's ahead of you. You can't aspire to anything because you have these blocks, right? You have these blocks in front of you that are essentially keeping you from aspiring to a future in college or whatnot. So Ishkimili was the first theme that came up from my interview analysis. And the next one, as I mentioned, was Tezcatlipoca, this sense of awareness and clarity. And Tezcatlipoca, it really refers to the internal clarity, the internal self-awareness, meaning that their self-talk, students' self-talk, the way they talk to themselves about their goals, the way students talk to themselves about their aspirations, their future, it started to change. It started to become more clear. They started to understand that they could be more than what society expects of them. So I associated this particular theme with Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror. And it's generally associated with internal growth and development, which is another concept that's very popular in indigenous philosophy, meaning that internal self-awareness. And when we talk about Tezcatlipoca, we have to talk about the different aspects of our internal development. So one of the things that I looked at in the interviews was how a lot of these interviews from students, a lot of the statements they made were based on their intellectual capacities and their feeling of wanting more, their feeling of wanting to do more. So the Cuauhtextli is the brain. The second aspect of Tezcatlipoca is the heart, or Yolo. The third one is the liver, our intuition, our fight or flight or freeze response. That's the Eli, the liver. And then finally, the Tepili Iwan Tepoli, or our reproductive organs, which I think really established this idea that students wanted to preserve. They wanted to preserve their dignity and future generations. So they were already talking about, I want a better future for my kids. So that means that I have to do well. I need to graduate high school and go to college if I want my kids to be successful. So even though these students didn't have kids, they're already thinking about future generations, which is, again, something that is directly tied to the concept of Tezcatlipoca. And finally, the last concept that I was able to extract based out of the student interviews was this concept of Xipetotec, which generally refers to transformation or rejuvenation. And it's really an indigenous form of human development that is directly guided by the cycles and the seasons observed in natural phenomena, generally translating to transmutation. So the same way the seasons of the year change the plants and the flora and the fauna, students also had that same change, where as soon as they started noticing that they had potential, they started thinking differently, they started moving differently, they started creating relationships differently. So Xipetotec was very much a big aspect of the students' experiences in their continuation high school journeys. Now, I wanted to speak a little bit more about this, this concept that we're developing in the Mosaic program, is this continuation high school to community college pipeline. In the Mosaic program, we have relationships with several continuation high schools in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And we know that in our particular continuation high schools, in order for students to be successful, in order for them to graduate, in order for them to get into college, they need to have specific relationships. And I think that's what the study boiled down to, is building relationships, building connections, building bridges. So one of the things that we noticed was the importance of really paying attention to the policies, the practices, and the beliefs that affirm the lived experiences, the potential, the humanity of students of color who are pushed out of comprehensive traditional high schools. So many times when students are expelled or pushed out of their high schools, they're really left to survive on their own, and they end up in continuation or alternative high schools where eventually they drop out, right? So some of the factors that shape the continuation high school to the community college pipeline are the environment, smaller classes, community gardens, colorful murals, and then the curriculum, working at their own pace, and also providing a college-going culture at these schools. Because if students don't have a college-going culture, if you don't have colleges and universities visiting you and showing you how to get in, applications, FAFSA, and so forth, they're not gonna have any idea, because most of the time, continuation high schools don't have UCLA or USC or Stanford running to show them the opportunities that they have at their institutions. And lastly—
Dr. Ojeda?
Yes.
Sorry, if you can make this your last sentence.
This is my last slide.
Thank you.
So just to bring it all together, it really boils down to relationships, y'all. The community colleges, the universities, and of course, continuation high school alumni who come back and share their experiences on how they did it when they transition into colleges. So I think what I want y'all to take away from this is really the potential of power in relationships with universities, colleges, and of course, our local high schools. So thank you again, everyone. Looking forward to your questions. And thank you again for listening and for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm learning like so much, like I'm taking notes on everything that you all have been presenting. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. Dr. Sanchez, you will be our final presenter, and then we'll go quickly into some Q&A.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for being here again. A lot of my study is grounded in what Alex was sharing, and so what Vanessa was sharing about Latinos in higher education. And so I'm going to skip over the literature review. I think what Vanessa shared really points a picture of Latinos in higher education. My whole study really focused on factors influencing the retention and graduation of Latino males specifically, really looking at four-year institutions that are Hispanic serving. Just like CSUN. The three sort of questions that grounded my own study was looking at how the community culture wealth model impacts Latino males in their way of enrollment, but also in continuation at their Hispanic serving institution. What factors contribute to the Latino male students' graduation at these institutions? And then are there other factors that are brought up aside from the community culture wealth model? One of the things that I really thought about as I was putting the study together is a lot of the research that's out there is about deficit thinking, that our students are not getting through the pipeline, and our students are not graduating. They come in, they don't graduate, they're not successful. So I wanted to understand what was making them successful. What were those factors that were really allowing our Latino males to succeed? We know through literature, and just to highlight a few points here, we know through literature that our Latino males are underperforming compared to their female counterparts. They're also underperforming to the majority of their male counterparts. And so one of the most important parts here is really understanding the significance of what it would mean to have a Latino male complete a college degree. We know that the more educated we are as a country, the better we're off. And so that really is the paradigm here, that I want to understand, how do we best support Latino males that start at our institutions, but also succeed and continue with graduation and moving forward. the theoretical framework that grounded my study was the community cultural wealth model through Yoso's framework, which has these sort of wealth areas that are grounded through cultural capital and critical race theory, which was mentioned in a previous study. But ultimately, some of the factors that are coming out of the community cultural wealth model is that our students are coming in. If you think about the context of what a student is that these students are coming in with aspirational capital, just like what Alex was sharing. They're coming with familial capital, that they're tied to family in their journey to be successful, that they have some sort of capital through social wealth and social understanding of what it means to be a Latino male, that we have navigational capital in the experiences that regardless of where they are in their life, they were able to successfully navigate to make it to our institutions. They have resistant capital. Their whole life, they've been told to Vanessa and someone else said earlier that they've been told that they can't be successful and therefore they're resistant. So really looking at the resistance capital of our students. And the last part here is that language has a lot to do with the success of these students. And so looking at this model is what really prompted my research questions, which I just shared earlier. I am going to share a little bit about my study itself. It was a phenomenological study, so really looking at the phenomenon of what it means to be a Latino male at these institutions. I had 16 participants who participated in my study at 2 different institutions. In the member checking process, I think I learned not only through these interviews was something that I was learning through the member checking process. These students wanted to share. And I think that was the number one story that I kept getting. They wanted to share. They wanted to talk about their experiences. They wanted to make sure that whoever came after them understood the way that allowed them to be successful. The last part of my study was the photo elicitation component. I asked several questions to them to explain in pictures and imagery about their experiences at these college campuses. And so they were able to provide me a clear picture that I am not sharing because I blocked them off. But if you have questions later, I can share the whole presentation. Just to give you context of who my participants were, I had 14 participants, 2 different institutions. The majority of my participants were Mexican or identified as Mexican, Mexican American, and any variation of Mexican. And 2 were Central American. Because my study was grounded in California, the demographics on this side of the country are predominantly what my study showed. I did have the majority of my students attending their local service areas. So meaning if I had a student at say in LA, they were attending Cal State LA as a measure of here. The majority of my students were also Pell recipients, meaning that they were low income. And the majority of my study, my study was done last year. So half of them were done that year, and then the year before the other half. Just to give you a picture of the involvement level, Vanessa was talking about involvement as a pillar of success. The majority of my students were also involved in leadership positions. They had some sort of academic support service. They were involved in cultural and political engagement, fraternity involvement, EOP, and work, which I think also speaks to the success rate of our students. And so as I was thinking about this, these are the 6 different models that I showed you earlier that were part of my study. Every single one of them was highlighted as a part of success for these students. And there were 3 additional sort of frameworks that were addressed. This notion of giving back, which goes back to the involvement of these students while I was having my interview process with them. They wanted to give back. So I coined the term ser servicial because they always thought about giving back to their community, giving back to other members of the organization. This notion of valor, meaning this notion that they wanted to make sure to succeed despite any obstacles. They had the gut, the will. I'm not going to use the word grit, but they had the grit to allow them to be successful. And then the last question, the last sort of wealth that I discovered as I was going through this research project was the spirituality component. That our students, although being male, and I think that's a lot of part here on the literature, that because being male and what it means to be a Latino male, this notion of machismo kept coming up in the literature. Our students, according to the literature, will tell you that they're not asking for assistance. These students did. These students were not afraid to ask for help. These students were eager to find the solution to some of their issues. They were eager to identify how do they themselves be successful, but not only for themselves, but for their family, which then ultimately sort of pinned the spiritual belief in La Virgen de Guadalupe. La Virgen de Guadalupe was mentioned by a lot of my participants as grounding them in their, as they were having exams, grounding them in a way that they sometimes felt like they couldn't continue at this institution, and there was someone that would allow them to be successful. One of the most important parts here, and I think I'm going to tie back to what Alex was saying about relationship building, the power that we have as institutional agents is incredible, specifically for Latino males. One of the most important parts that they said, as I was looking at social capital and familial capital and their own success, is the partnership and the relationship that we're building with advisors, they were building with mentors, they were building with their faculty members, specifically those that look like them, those that were of color, those that and one participant said, we're fighting the fight with them. Our students are looking, our students are wanting to engage, are wanting to ensure that we as an institution are able to provide the support that they need. And so as implications, I had a couple of sort of things that I wanted to make sure that I addressed, that as faculty members, we need to acknowledge the diversity of the students and not see them as less than. A lot of the literature says that our students are coming unprepared. Well, they made it to our institution. How do we prepare them now? And so thinking about that structure, our administration that supports Latinx students demonstrate Latinx students matter. So similar to the program that we had the other day with Dr. Frank Harris, and the previous program that we had with Dr. Gina Garcia, really addressing that our students matter in the administration's point of view. The last couple of things that I wanted to mention at the institutional level is that our students need to understand what an HSI means. I think 90% of my students, when I was telling them, oh, you're in a Hispanic serving institution, that's nothing that phases them. They don't know what it means. Regardless of the percentage of our student body, our students still feel like they don't belong. Our students don't see themselves represented in the classroom. And so we want to make sure that they understand that they're in an HSI that matters and that cares. Offer on-campus employment. The majority of our students who were employed were the ones that showed that the institution was there for support. Some of the comments that they were sharing as they were going through the thing is that my schedule was flexible. They understood my curriculum. They understood that I was able to succeed. They understood that what it meant for me to be a student on this campus. And so that notion to the connection to the campus is important. EOP, cultural centers, and other cultural support services was critical and important for them. So as we think about how do we develop these initiatives, these are the things that our students are needing for them to be successful. The last couple of things here, it's ethnic studies and culturally relevant curriculum. I know that we're going through a lot of conversations over the last couple of years about ethnic studies and culturally relevant curriculum. That needs to continue in order for us to continue to impart support to our students. And the last thing on here is the expansion of support services, basic needs initiative, counseling. The majority of my students were seeking counseling support. And so the notion that Latino males don't seek support is a notion of the past. Our students were engaged in seeking these critical services for them to be successful. And so I continue to think about one of the most important parts here, and I'll share my presentation, is that as an institution who supports Hispanic, Latino students or Latinx students, we must identify what is important on this campus. And so I'll leave you with that. What is important? We mentioned about the need to dismantle these systems, with the need to restructure education. That is critical now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez. I just wanted to take a quick moment before we go into some open Q&A. And I'll, if you could use the raise hand function, I'll be able to call you when we get to the Q&A portion. But I really just wanted to highlight the amazing and dynamic and brilliant contributions that you've all made to not just scholarship, but practice. Each one of your studies really engaged race and gender, different types of theoretical frameworks, and we don't often see that within higher ed scholarship. We may see that here amongst our communities, but in the broader like national and international landscape, what you're doing is really groundbreaking and really helping us push our conversations forward with your theories, with your methods, with your recommendations. And I think that really highlights the utility of both the PhD and the EDD. For all of you to complete these degrees while you were working professionals is like mind-blowing, right? For you to like really theorize at these levels and to conduct these studies and to write and to contribute is so important to the larger intellectual community, and also really important for representation, right? We know that people of color and women are underrepresented in terms of our faculty ranks and in terms of our staff and practitioner and administrator ranks. So for all of you to now be included in those ranks with the level of doctorates is really important for this overall work to dismantle the systems that so many of you alluded to. And I credit a lot of that to our EDD program in the College of Ed. This is a serious plug. We are still accepting applications right now. So tell your folks, tell your friends, tell your families. Our degree window, our application window is open for our higher ed and our community college cohort. So I think this just goes to the importance of having organic intellectuals on our campuses and really acknowledging the hard work that you've all put in. So thank you. I want to open it now for a large Q&A, either if you'd like to ask one of the panelists individually, or if you would like to ask questions collectively. And if we don't have many questions, I have lots of questions to ask them as well, so don't worry. Would anyone like to start? Yes, Diana.
Hello, everyone. I am just like, this was mind blowing. I know most, if not all of the people who just received and who presented, and I'm just like, it's so amazing. Congratulations to you guys all. This was so informative, even just to me as a colleague, as a student of life, as a person who just even interacts with students on a daily basis. Just to those of you who don't know me, I'm Diana Medina. I work in financial aid. I am homegrown. I've been at CSUN for 25 plus years. This includes my undergrad and my professional work. So it's amazing just to hear everything. And I think all of your presentations are also going to help me be a better staff member and in the services that I provide our students here on campus. But my question is to how were you able to manage, and any of the panelists can answer, your work and doctoral work? Like, how did that work? Did you all not sleep? Did you guys like how were you able to juggle that and accomplish and follow through and finish your degrees is my question to you all, is the time management.
I guess I can start. I cannot speak for everybody else, but I will say the doctoral program taught me about what it means to learn how to switch gears, right? When you have certain things that are thrown your way, when you have different priorities that come in different deadlines, you have to form a different hustle that you may not have had to do before. So for instance, I learned that for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but I would go to sleep at like 7 o'clock, wake up at like midnight, and then just work all the way through, when it was just a time when my home was peaceful, when there were zero distractions and I could just focus. And I wasn't doing that for the whole 3 years, but there were times where I had to do that. I'm so thankful for the support of my partner, Chad, and my family and my cohort. Like, if it wasn't for them and to have the same experiences of struggling and having to go through that and then having to transition to fully online at the very end, it was a very interesting experience. So I think it's different for everybody, but I think I know we'll talk about it later, but it's about the support systems that we have in place and how we had to switch gears along the way.
The only other thing I'll just add to what just shared is the importance of having a supportive supervisor. I think for the journey, my PhD program was not a cohort model, so I wasn't necessarily pressured to finish within a cohort. And so it was identifying what it meant for me to finish. So yes, the family component was important. I got married in the middle of my program. I like family happened in the midst of everything that I needed to understand that this needed to get done. And so I think about my journey was 7 years. And so that whole process from the beginning to the end, it didn't matter how long it took, I needed to get it done. And it was important for my supervisor to continue to pressure, how are you doing? And so I think that that notion of just even how are you doing and checking in was really important, and finally got it done. So life just happens. And the other thing that I'll just say, being someone who is particular about the way I write, it didn't matter. At one point I said, you know what, I just got to get this done. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be perfect. It just needs to be enough. And that's okay. And so just write and get it done.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like, just, you know, make sure you write it and get it done is one thing. And I can be very picky about my own writing, but as far as how to manage being a full-time staff at CSUN and advising students and then doing this full-time as well, it was a challenge, especially during that second year when I was about to leave. I was like, I'm done. But, you know, I had a really supportive advisor, Dr. Miguel Ceja, as well as, you know, the rest of the committee and my cohort, CC 17. They were a great group of folks that were also working professionals, and it was helpful to have them being supportive. My family was very supportive along the way. As far as how do you manage that, it's a hard balance. You know, you have to do it, as Dejel mentioned, like in the evenings, right after you get out of work. I would do it during my breaks, my lunch break. I would be eating at my desk and then typing and doing research at the same time, and then get back to work right after that. So it was a challenge. You know, weekends were devoted to this as well. So, you know, it gets done though. It can be done. It's just a challenge, but it does help to have all the supportive team with you.
And I would agree with everything that was said, and emphasize that time management is probably key in this. That's one of the keys, I should say. It's time management, learning to use every 15 minutes to accomplish something. So that was really key for me. Even, you know, if it's a lunch break or after work, when I really feel, you know, pretty tired by the end of the day, still squeezing in those 15 minutes was important. And then, of course, the weekends. So for me, I had to say goodbye to all my free time over the weekends, and for pretty much 3 years. So that's one side. But the other side is really important, is the support network. So for me, it was the support of my dissertation committee, Dr. D'Anzel, Dr. Watkins, and Dr. Moore. That was really critical. And the other absolutely crucial element was the support of my cohort family, CC 17. I think we all went through those times where we just couldn't do it anymore, and then the rest of us would pull others, you know, with them. So sort of like the tide that floated all boats. The program, the faculty were incredibly supportive. So if there was a framework where you really had a very realistic chance to do it full-time, work full-time and be a student, this is the program to do it. If anyone is considering, this would be the right place for you to go to.
Yeah, and thank you for your question, Diana. And I'm sure that's something that, you know, a lot of folks think about when they're, you know, really thinking about whether or not they want to go into doctoral work, because it is a lot of work. But for me, I think it came with having to shift my mentality. I think it was something that really took a lot of internal work, similar to Tezcatlipoca, right? You have to work on that internal growth. And I know that I had to do that when I graduated with my BA. I had to shift mentalities when I went into a master's program. And then after my master's, going into the professional world, again, another shift in mentality. but I also, just like everyone else, I wanted to emphasize the importance of a support system. I have the benefit of family privilege. So I have a family who was very supportive, that was, able to kind of leave me alone when I needed that time to write. But also one thing is that the pandemic started on our last year of the program. So I conducted all of my research via Zoom, and it was not easy, but at the same time, it also facilitated a lot of the things that probably would have costed more time if it was in person, right? So I saw a lot of benefits to doing everything virtually, but in turn, get it in whenever you could, right? And I think that was important. Writing in the middle of the night, as Vanessa mentioned, during lunch breaks. But it's really I think it's really just really manifesting that desire. I think for me was regardless of any challenge, regardless of any obstacle, it's going to get done. And that was the mentality I think I had to adopt.
Thank you for that. I have a question in the chat here, specifically for those of you who did your dissertation work with Latinx students. Did you notice any differences between students who identified as Mexican American versus those who could identify from being from Central America?
I could say with my students, because I had half Chicano Latino students and the other half Latino students. So for the Chicano students, they tended to, if they had classes in Chicano and Chicano studies, they talked about a lot of how much support they received from their faculty, their staff that was in Chicano studies classes. And if they were a major in that was especially in those moments that they experienced discrimination, and they would go to them as if they were their own counselors. They would go to them and vent and get some support there. And it helped them to have that person to lean on and to talk to. I didn't hear that so much from other folks, but with my other half of students, they were mixed between Central American and South American. But I can't say I could say the same about that. But I don't know if maybe Freddy or Alex had anything different.
The only other difference in my study, and I had two students, one on each of the campuses, was the connection to the term Chicano. Although it was not even one of my questions, they referenced Chicano studies departments as them feeling not included. However, after they understood the concept, and that was where they found home. So I think the notion at the beginning of identifying who these individuals are and not feeling like they connect, they were able to connect once they understood how to do so. And so for that experience, and it went back to the familial capital, that they wanted to build family because sometimes they felt isolated. And these particular two students shared that word of isolation. But again, they found the connection and they ranted and raved about the Chicano Studies department after they connected.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any other questions, either for the panelists individually or as a whole? Chino, yes, I see your hand up.
So I had to tap in, just log in and give a special shout out to some mentors and some doctor students, or doctors now. Freddy Sanchez, Alex Ojeda, Dr. Vanessa Martinez. I wanted to ask all the presenters specifically, how did y'all take care of yourselves through this process of being professionals, being doctor students, having to do research, and not only researching on the topic that I assume you hold close to your heart, but that has taken a big chunk of your life, right? Because I know I've had a couple conversations with some of the presenters, and just knowing how much time it's taken for y'all to get your doctors, congratulations on that. I want to know how y'all took care of yourselves specifically through this whole thing.
That's a great question, Chino, and thank you Thank you for asking that, because, you know, it all boils down to wellness, right? If I ever felt like I was, you know, my mental health was being challenged, I wouldn't have moved forward with it, you know. But I think being able to seek out different opportunities to, you know, kind of decompress, you know, maybe take a day of not writing, not thinking about the research. But for me, it didn't really feel like a lot of work, because as you mentioned, Chino, what we do in Mosaic, what I do with the continuation high school students, it's an honor, it's a privilege. I take it as an opportunity. Every time I get an opportunity to work with high school students, I'm all over it, right? But also understanding that sometimes there's a lot of emotional exhaustion, right? And during my interviews, one of my participants was going through COVID. Her grandparents had COVID and she was living with her grandparents, so she couldn't be in the same house as them. So she was living out of her car. So even some of the circumstances that my actual participants were going through were kind of, you know, transferred over to me, and I was feeling that stress with them, you know, and also, you know, offering some assistance through monetary support, through, you know, support with, you know, hygiene products. So, you know, even as I was, you know, researching, I was also continuing to be able to provide that extra support that students needed. But again, a lot of the times it was just, I guess, normal to me, right? Some of the things I do on a regular basis, but I did notice that when I would feel tired or when I would feel exhausted, I would just chill, right? I would just sit back, you know, put the work down and just relax, right? And I know a lot of times I would feel guilty for doing that, because I know there's a deadline, right? And a lot of us are guilty of doing that also, feeling bad for not working, right? Feeling bad for, you know, taking a break and having a cup of coffee, or, you know, taking a break and going on a walk to the park. We feel guilty because we know we should be working. So that was something that I had to negotiate too, right? And not feel guilty about taking breaks and not feel guilty about investing in my wellness. But it all boils down to that, is just really noticing and being in tune with your body and knowing when you need to kind of step back and relax a little bit. So for me, it was just being able to pay attention to those cues and then respond to it with something that has to do with, you know, mental wellness. So again, you know, taking a walk, or, you know, just chilling outside with my dogs. It's always good to just take little breaks. But other than that, I think it's, you know, just again, paying attention to your body. And our body has all the information that we need. So when our body tells us something, it's important to respond.
Yeah, and to follow up with Alex, thank you for that. I do agree with that, as someone that has provided mental health counseling to others in the past, and knowing how important wellness and taking care of oneself is. It was important for me to understand, like, what are those moments when you feel burnt out and you want to prevent that. So you have to take that time for yourself, you know, even if it means stopping writing for the evening and then starting when you're fresh in the morning. But it's really important to have that. It's helpful to take care of yourself. And I think what Alex mentioned, as far as having that passion for doing what you're doing, I think that's what helped continue the process, because, you know, you're helping a community that you know personally, that you understand personally, and you've experienced a lot of the challenges that they've had. And so that helps to push forward, even in those moments when it's after midnight and you know that you have to wake up early for work, but you're still working on this. You take care of yourself the best way possible. And I think it's helpful to have a support system and to make sure you go to counseling. I think we need to get rid of that stigma that we have, and especially in communities of color, with regards to counseling, and just go to it. So thanks for the question.
I would like to just, oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dejel.
Are you sure? I was just basically just going to say, for me, what I found is I found a love through running. And that was the only way for me, like through the program, I embedded working out. I embedded doing what I knew worked for me, that was going to, you know, release those endorphins, was going to help me to feel like I was powerful, that I was moving forward, that I was moving towards something. That was what I found that worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but what I implemented was, when I knew that I felt I didn't have the energy, or I felt lost, or I didn't know where I was going, I found myself on the road or at the SRC at the university. I was there every morning before work, getting my miles in to set the tone for the day. So again, it's about setting the tone. It's about changing gears, and about doing what you know that works best for you to recalibrate you. So again, and what I loved about that is I still have adopted that into my life now, and I've run every single day since since the beginning of this year, and it's something that I found that makes me feel powerful, and then I feel great about myself. And so I think everybody can find that unique thing that works for them, whether it's taking a walk, whether it's meditation or mental health and awareness, is finding what works for you that's going to recharge you.
That I, by the way, ever since Dejel started running, I've been admiring him running. I was not able to do something like that. I did, though, prioritize working out as, you know, the little free time did we have. So that it is very difficult. And sometimes I actually was not sure I was okay. I just kind of like pulled through the best I could. But what I think is also very important to know is that it is incredibly interesting what we learned in the program, and it was eye-opening. It was transformative. So in that sense, it wasn't all work. It was just, for me personally, life-changing. And that was honor and pleasure as well. And then, of course, choosing the topic that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, not just for one semester, but throughout your career, that was key for me as well. That by itself kept me going because I wanted to learn more and more. And by itself, that was a great motivator and great enabler to continue forward.
Thank you. And thank you, Freddie. I saw that you put your comment in the chat. I appreciate it. We are 1 minute before our ending time, and I really want to respect all the time and effort that the panelists have put in, as well as you all as participants. I'm sure you can message them independently. You all know where they work. I think you can find them virtually in some Zoom space somewhere. So thank you so much for attending today. Thank you to the EEC for providing the spotlight and for really having us engage in like moments of joy and celebration. I know they're hard to come by during this time. So we appreciate you for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you for having us. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And in the chat, you'll notice some of our contact information is listed there. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions either about the research, the program. It's been a very supportive program, the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies program at CSUN. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.